good to go. All right, awesome. Welcome, Todd. Thank you so much again for joining. Really, really excited to talk all about clean wine and the importance of it. And I'm excited to learn because I love wine and also share with my audience. So before we dive in, I'd love just a little intro around like who you are, your role in the company, and maybe just a little background about where you're from and how you got into the wine industry would be really cool.
Wow, that's a lot. So
Start wherever.
I am from the Carolinas. I was born in South Carolina, grew up in North Carolina, but I moved to California 21 years ago, and I live in the Napa Valley, right in the heart, in this tiny little town called Yountville, which for those listening who know what the French Laundry is, I live about a 5-minute walk from there. So how I got in the wine business, I've been drinking wine since I was 9 years old. And a lifelong aficionado, and also a lifelong biohacker, right? And so biohacking is how we deploy our behavior to have positive influence on our neurological or biological outcome. So the most common biohack would probably be like a diet, right? And then it gets a lot more sophisticated from there. But any behavior we use that influences has a positive influence on our outcome. Is a biohack. And so it's the art and science, I should say, because not all biohacks are proven by science, right? Many are anecdotal. So, but anyway, I'd been a lifelong biohacker, and about 6 years ago, long before it became popular, or was even widespreadly known outside of the biohacking circles, I started experimenting with a therapeutic ketogenic diet. Today, I'm no longer on a therapeutic diet because my fat's not high enough. I'm on a low carb, what I'd call modified ketogenic. I also only eat once per day. Yep. So that keeps me in ketosis by default of just not eating, right? Yep. And so, so today I'm on what I call a modified ketogenic, which is like the Atkins diet, which is a very low carb, but not high enough fat to be therapeutic.
Sure.
And so, but I did experiment for 2 or 3 years with a therapeutic ketogenic diet, and I had very favorable outcomes, and I'd love to do it again. I just find it a little bit boring, right? And so, and I really like taste. And so so when I became ketogenic, I found I couldn't drink standard wines anymore. And I don't know, at first I thought it was just they were too high in alcohol, because American wines, well, globally, alcohol has been increasing in wines for the last 30 years. And in the United States, it averaged nearly 15% now. And so I was talking with a friend of mine who I thought was the smartest person in the wine business. I live in Napa, I'm surrounded by wine people. And I had made wine in Napa in 2005. So I had some enology experience. But I was talking to my friend and I said, look, I'm going to make some low alcohol wine because alcohol, I think, is making me sick. I would note that it's a fairly common side effect for people who go on a ketogenic diet, that they have a less beneficial relationship with alcohol in general, right? And so we don't really know why, but it's a very common side effect. So I was thought about making some low alcohol wine. And my friend says, well, have you tasted any of the low alcohol wines that are being produced in Europe? And I was like, no. And so I went on a search for low alcohol wines that were being made in Europe. And that's when the next thing happened, which was really the foundation of dry farm wines, which was I stumbled across the natural wine revolution that was beginning at that time in central France. Today, it's a very big deal, but at the time, virtually nobody had heard of it. And so that term natural wine is confusing to many people. They're like, oh, aren't all wines natural? And they're not, for the reasons I'm about to describe to you. So a natural wine, they're actually quite rare. Less than 0.1% of all the wine in the world is natural. And to say that a wine is natural, there is a general understanding in the wine world what that means, right? It's not generally understood to the public. I've told a few million people about it, but it's not generally well known to the public.
Yeah.
There is no international certification for natural wines. Now, Dry Farm Wines, my company, has a certification process that each wine must meet. We publish those certified results on each wine. but the word natural doesn't have an international definition that is certified. Everyone understands what it means. France just announced 2 weeks ago that they were going to be the first country to certify natural wines, which is a positive step in the right direction, right? That we can go to certification process around what this actually means. But it's very simple, and it means three things. It means that the fruit was organically or biodynamically farmed, no chemical farming ever. Number two, that the wine was fermented with wild native yeast. Now, what that means, every grape berry at the time of harvest has wild yeast on the skin. It looks like a white waxy kind of substance, and it appears on the skin of every grape berry in the world at harvest. And that yeast is collected indigenously in the vineyard where the wine is grown. So it's what's called indigenous wild native yeast. Natural winemakers always ferment with this wild native yeast. Commercial winemakers always ferment with genetically modified lab cultured yeast. And the reason they do that is that the wild native yeast, this indigenous yeast, is delicate. It's temperamental, it's difficult to work with, and you have to watch it and coddle it. And you can't make wine in very large volumes with it. It just breaks down, right? And so it can only be worked with in small environments. Commercial wines, for the reasons I'll tell you in a moment, are made in large environments, right? Where large quantities of wine are being made. So also native yeast will not withstand a very high alcohol environment, and native yeast will, are just temperamental, they're fragile, right? So the third thing is that there are no additives in natural wines. All right, now let's talk about what a commercial wine is. Because here's where the big problem is. These are the dirty, dark secrets of the wine business.
Scary.
About to be revealed, right? So number one, the same thing that's happened in our food supply has happened in our wine supply. That's been massive corporate consolidation because of money and greed. So everything you're about to hear, A, is verifiable by an easy Google search, and B, it's all about money, right? So they're not trying to make wines better or healthier. They're trying to make them cheaper, faster, and more profitable.
Yep.
And that involves the use of chemicals and additives. That also involves industrial farming with chemicals. That also involves irrigation. We'll talk about all of those items. Name of my company is Dry Farm Wines. That means that the wines that we drink and sell have no irrigation. They're dry farmed, right? Irrigation is bad for the planet. It's bad for the vine. It turns out it's bad for your health. So commercial wines, let's get back to the consolidation and the money thing, because this is all about money, right? Same things happen in our food supply. It's grotesque, right?
Yeah.
If you care about your health, care about what you put in your body. So 52% of US wines are made by just 3 giant conglomerates. And the top 30 companies make over 70% of US wines. So when you go into a grocery store or a wine shop, you go into a Costco or wherever you go into, and you see thousands of bottles of wine, right? Hundreds or thousands of brands and labels. Those are all made by generally just a handful of companies. Now, they don't want you to know that. And so these very slick, clever, multi-billion-dollar marketing conglomerates, see, they hide behind thousands of brands and labels. They usually have a chateau or a farmhouse on the front of the label, right? Because they want you to think you're drinking from some small farm, when in fact, you were drinking from massive wine factories located in Central California, right? That are fermenting and making industrially farmed wine, right? Farmed with chemicals like glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. Roundup is the #1 applied herbicide in U.S. vineyards. Again, everything I'm going to share with you is easily verifiable with a Google search, right? So then the big dirty dark secret that I don't want you to know about is that there are 76 additives approved by the FDA for the use in winemaking.
Hmm.
Now, some of those are natural, but many of them are quite toxic. And many of them, we just don't know what they do to you, right? The problem is you don't know what's in your wine. And here's why. Here's why you don't know about the 76 additives. Because the government, the politicians receive millions of dollars in lobby money from the wine industry to keep contents labeling off of wine. Mm-hmm. So every time there's an effort to get contents label on a bottle of wine, it's defeated in Washington, where they're getting greased up with political lobby money, right? You may also know there's not a nutritional information and no nutritional information either on wine. Mm-hmm. That's also not an accident, because they don't want you to know how much sugar's in it, right? And so these 76 additives, I mean, the nastiest of the group is called dimethyl dicarbonate, which is a highly toxic poison that is used to treat the most common bacterial fault in wine called Brettanomyces. It is applied to tens of millions of gallons of wine a year. This chemical is highly toxic. If you were to breathe it while applying, it would burn your lungs. If it would get on your skin, it'd burn your skin, right? It has to be applied in hazmat suits. Oof. It's a terrible thing. But here's the thing. I think you should know what you're drinking. So I'd be perfectly happy if it just had a contents label on it, mm-hmm. right? If you want to drink dimethyl dicarbonate, I think you should know that you're drinking it. Yep. If a wine label had a contents label on it, it would look just like the rest of processed foods you see in the grocery store. It'd be this rectangular label with a whole bunch of names and stuff. You had no idea what they are, right? It could include color agents and dyes and body stabilizers and ammonia phosphate or copper sulfate, right? These are all approved additives, and you can easily find them just by searching FDA approved wine additives in a Google search. It's just the wine industry has been very successful in keeping this secret, right? So that you got factory manufacturing, you got factory farming. This is, and then the irrigation, as I said, we come back to in a moment. So irrigation, see, the only reason you irrigate a grapevine is because of money. It is cheaper to farm an irrigated grapevine. It increases the yield, that is the size of the cluster of berries, right? So it has a bigger yield on every cluster, because when it gets irrigation, it also gets nitrogen, which is fertilizer, right, to promote growth. So you get a bigger yield, and then it might not surprise you that you also, the fruit weighs more because it's filled with water, right? It's plump. Yeah. Well, fruit is sold by the ton. So if you want to make more money, you make the fruit weigh more with a bigger yield and fill it full of water, right? Now the problem, there's a whole bunch of problems with that. None of this will surprise you, right? It's just common sense. Just like if you feed it a bunch of water, it's going to weigh more. That's just common sense, right? Well, the other thing it does, not only is it weighs billions of gallons of water, right? And by the way, grapevines have been growing all over the world in the most harsh climates for over 10,000 years, right? For example, we sell wines from Sicily and Italy, which is a small volcanic island, off the coast of Naples, and where it is insufferably dry and hot, right? And very, very rocky soil, because it's the type of volcanic soil it is. It's super, super rocky. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever seen The Godfather, right, the movie, the early movies were filmed in Sicily, and you can see how rocky and hot it is in the film. But so anyway, irrigation also, remember the grapeberry is filled with more water. Right. That dilutes the polyphenols that are in the berry and available to you for your health. Now, polyphenols, flavonoids, and antiflavonoids are the healthy compounds in wine, particularly red wines. And if we have time, I can explain to you why red wines are 4 times higher in polyphenols than white.
Wow.
But these health properties, these compounds are diluted with the water. The other thing is diluted, and the reason the Europeans don't allow it, the other thing is diluted is the flavor of the grape. So the character of the fruit is also heavily diluted that's not outside of common sense. When you add water, you dilute the flavor. The other problem that leads to, which the wine industry likes, the other problem that leads to is when you fill a grape berry with water, it has to get riper. In other words, higher in sugar at the time of harvest to develop proper flavoring. Now, why is that important? Because the higher the sugar at the time of harvest will determine the corresponding amount of alcohol that's in the wine when it ferments. Because how wine is made and how alcohol gets into wine is that the yeast, when activated, right, the yeast eat the sugar as their food source. And the byproduct of the yeast eating the sugar is ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. So that's how alcohol gets into wine. But the higher the sugar is at the time of harvest, the higher the outcome of alcohol will be at the end. Well, why is that important to me? Because, and this surprises a lot of people to hear this from the wine guy. It's like, well, alcohol is a dangerous neurotoxin and a dangerous drug that has destroyed millions of people's lives. And so I think if you want to pursue a healthy life, that you should care about how much alcohol you're drinking, right? And I'm not the guy who likes to have a glass of wine. I like to have several, right? And so oftentimes a bottle. Now, I drink wines, the wines I drink, because I can select the wines that I want. So I select lower. We don't sell anything over 12.5% alcohol. And as low as 7%. The wines I personally drink are generally between 9 and 11.5% for several reasons. I can drink a bottle, I feel great, right? Also, I like the taste of those wines. They're lower in alcohol, which means they're higher in water, right? Because there's only 3 things in wine, natural wine. There's only 3 things in natural wine: alcohol, water, and these polyphenols. That's it, right? Nothing added, nothing taken away. And so, I just prefer the taste of them. Natural wines also taste better than commercial wines. Once you start drinking natural wine, you go back to drinking commercial wine, you're like, ugh, there's something in this, right? You can taste the additives. I can smell them, right? And you just don't return to it, which is, fortunate for us and great for the booming natural wine industry around the world. That helps support small family farms, because you can't make natural wine in very large quantities. So there are about 1,200 family farms around the world that make natural wines. And we're the largest buyer and seller of natural wines in the world. But there are other ways to get natural wine. I want to be sure to cover that. So we obviously like for you to drink our wine, but if you don't, that's okay. What we think is really important is that you're drinking natural wines if you're concerned about your health, right? And there's several different ways to find natural wines other than getting them from us. Now, they won't be certified by us, and we'll talk about our certification process in a moment and why it's important to us and to our health. But they won't be certified by us, but they will meet some general criteria that we believe in. They may not be lower in alcohol either. Many natural wines are higher than 12.5%. And so it may not be, we have a cutoff as part of our certification. I'll tell you in a moment. But if you're looking for natural wines, you can do a Google search in your area for natural wines. And if you live in a major market, New York or Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Dallas, you're going to find some limited selection. You'll find bars or restaurants that may specialize in natural wine. If you're in a really progressive market, like if you're in Brooklyn, there, are a bunch of natural wine bars there. And the thing about natural wine is that if you're a natural wine retailer or you're a natural wine bar, then there's no commercial wines there. These people are fanatics, right? I mean, that's going to be it. And then, I mean, it's not like you're going to waltz into a wine store and say, do you have any natural wine? They won't even know what you're talking about, right? And so, or most of them won't. But they're certainly not going to carry it. There's no section for natural wines in your wine store. I mean, there may be at some point in the future, but that's just not how it's done. And so, but if you go into a natural wine retailer, they're not also going to sell any commercial wine, right? I mean, they're just like, you know, fanatical about natural wines. So there's also a smartphone app called Raisin, which is a map-based app that will guide you to natural wine retailers, bars, or restaurants that feature natural wines.
Amazing. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it's not very effective in the United States outside of the same major markets that you could find on a Google search. So it works really well in New York. It works really well in Los Angeles. It works really well in San Francisco. But it's not going to populate. Now, if you're in Europe, it's a European-based app. It's wildly more popular there, like in Paris, which is the sort of capital of natural wine drinking, right? Where there are probably, 50 natural wine bars and restaurants and retailers. In London, there'll be, 20, 25. In New York, you'd be 25 to 30, something like that. But anyway, so Raisin works quite well, and also in Canada and Montreal. Montreal is a big natural wine hub. So you'll find natural wines where you find hipsters and where you find, kind of progressive thinkers, and healthier people. So anyway, but let's talk about the dry farm wine certification and kind of open it up to questions, because I know I've dumped a lot on you here, but it's easier just to get out sort of all the data points so people know, kind of how to think about it. Yeah. But in the dry farm wine certification, which every wine we drink and sell, I drink the same wines I sell. So every wine that we drink and sell must meet our criteria. And our criteria goes beyond just being natural. Yeah. That's where it begins. So first, it must meet our aesthetic. So the wine has to be really delicious, right? And we have a very stringent aesthetic. And I say that because the natural wine world is also filled with a lot of wines that are faulted because they haven't used chemicals and they haven't sterilized the wine with sulfur dioxide, right? Then oftentimes in natural wines, you find what we would call classic faults, right? And those faults impart an off-putting aromatic or taste. Now, in the natural wine world, many of these faults, or funky wines as we would call them, these funky wines are celebrated, by hipsters. This is like, if you thought that was funky, you should taste this, right? And so kind of like in certain cheeses, right? Funkiness is kind of celebrated among fans of those cheeses. Well, the same thing for wine. There are fans of these types of wines, but those are not the wines we drink and buy, right? And so, in fact, of all the natural wines that we taste, we only end up with about 31% of them making it into our portfolio. Wow. The others are rejected either for aesthetic or they don't pass our lab test. So a dry farm wine certification is that it must be natural to begin with, which means that it's organically or biodynamically farmed. It's fermented wild native yeast and doesn't have any additives, right? Then on top of that, it cannot be irrigated. Most natural wines outside of the United States, I've never seen one that was irrigated. In the United States, natural wines are irrigated, which is why there's about 25 natural wine producers in the United States, but none of them meet our criteria. Wow. And the number one thing that knocks them out is irrigation, right? Because you can't unirrigate a vineyard. If once a vineyard's irrigated, you have to start over. Okay. Right? You can't pull irrigation off of a mature vine. Sure. So, because it doesn't have the root structure necessary to survive, because the root structure of an irrigated grapevine is about 3 feet wide and about 3 feet deep, because it gets all of its nutrition and water from the surface from a little tube just above the trunk. An unirrigated grapevine can have root structures that can span 40 or 50 feet deep, right? Because they're struggling, searching for nutrient and moisture. So if you just pull off irrigation off of an irrigated vine, it will die, wow. Right? So So our wines must be dry farmed. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we don't sell any wine over 12.5%. We also lab test for alcohol, and I'll tell you why. Another collusion between the U.S. wine industry and the politicians in Washington is that the alcohol stated on a wine bottle is not required to be accurate by law and can be as high as 1.5% higher than what's stated. So if it says 14%, it can be 15.5% and still be legal. And in independent lab tests, most of them oftentimes fall out of even that 1.5% change because there's no enforcement on what's stated in the first place. Right. So, and then they must be additive free. And we also test for sulfur, right? We also test for mold. So mycotoxins like ochratoxin A can be present in wine. Dave Asprey at Bulletproof Coffee is very famous for testing for mycotoxins. In fact, he was the one that really kind of gave us the idea we should be testing for them. No U.S. wine is tested for mycotoxin unless it's exported outside the U.S. Right? So European wines, the EU requires mycotesting on all wines. So the only time a U.S. wine gets tested is if it gets exported to Europe.
Okay.
So, and then sugar. We don't allow any sugar in our wine. So our wines are lab tested for sugar and all contain under 1 gram per liter, which is statistically sugar-free, right? At the glass level, you couldn't even measure it. A liter is 1,000 milliliters. A wine bottle is 750 milliliters. So it's not even a gram in the bottle. Now, does that matter? Well, I'm ketogenic and I live largely a sugar-free life. And so it matters a lot to me, I believe, and one of the reasons that I fast and I eat a super low carb, sugar-free, I believe that most of chronic illness that we're seeing around the world, led by Americans, is related to the overproduction of insulin, right? From too high a blood glucose, which is why there are 80 million pre-diabetics in the United States. So I want to maintain a very low to steady blood glucose at all times, right? Now, how common is sugar in wine? Well, we recently tested the top 20 best-selling U.S. wines. Those lists are readily available, just like everything else I've told you, right? So we recently tested the top 20. We were doing it because we were going to do a news story on it, but the results were so shocking that we decided not to go forward with it because we were going to implicate so many wine companies. We thought we could be at risk for some kind of litigation, right? So we decided not to release the information publicly. We were doing it on behalf, actually, of our public relations firm. They're like, you talk a lot about sugar and wine. Can you give us some more, something more specific to work with? Yeah. We declined to give them any more information than what I'm about to tell you, which was, of the 20 wines that we tested, only 2 met our criteria for sugar. Wow. Right? So winemakers love sugar. Americans love sugar. And these are wine. The only way you know if a wine contains sugar is to lab test it. Because a lot of times you can't taste it.
Sure.
It depends on how much is in it, whether you can taste it. Obviously, if it's a sweet wine, you can taste it.
Sure.
But if you're talking about a moderately balanced wine, you might not be able to taste the sugar because there's a lot of acid in wine. Yeah. Just like when you're making lemonade, there's a lot of acid. You got to put a lot of sugar in there before you start to get rid of the acid.
Yeah.
Right. And so same reason that, there are 32 grams of sugar in a can of Coca-Cola, but you couldn't drink it if it weren't very high in ascorbic acid, right? That acid is what allows you to be able to swallow all that sugar. Sure. If you put 32 grams of sugar in a glass of water, you wouldn't be able to drink it, right? I mean, most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so that's, and in addition to that, we don't allow any additives and we measure sulfur. The sulfites are naturally occurring in any food that's fermented. Yeah. Sauerkraut, kombucha, pickles, anything that's fermented is going to contain sulfites. The question is, How high are the sulfites,
Mm.
right? Our wines average 39 parts per million in sulfites.
Okay.
The US legal limit for sulfites is 350 parts per million. Now, how does it get high? Because they add sulfur dioxide as a preservative and a sterilizer, right? And one final thing I'll say about sterilizing wine before we kind of go to Q&A is when you sterilize wine, as commercial winemakers do, you kill the wine and you kill the living bacteria that's in it. Natural wines have not been sterilized. Why is that important? Dr. David Perlmutter, the New York Times bestselling author on gut and brain health and the relationship to brain health to the gut, has written several times about our wines, dry farm wines, natural wines, and why they're healthier, because they contain living bacteria that is beneficial to the gut microbiome. And so, as many fermented foods do, right? And so, like sauerkraut, it's great for your gut health, right? So anyway, so there's we could talk a really long time about many of these issues,
Yeah.
but I just want to kind of throw out just sort of the highlights. You could go down a wormhole on any of them, right? But anyway, does that bring up any questions, or do you have any questions from before?
So many. So first, it's so fascinating because my business is really focused on this concept of clean living. So really educating people about, the wine we're drinking and also the products that we're using on a daily basis. And it's also similar, whether it's the meat industry or the food industry or the, beauty industry, and just the lack of laws and regulations, like not having to put the ingredients on the wine bottle. There's a lot of products that we're using that same thing. You don't have to list the ingredients, or they can list them, but there's all these loopholes where, like, fragrance in your, beauty products can be over 1,000 different ingredients that they don't have to disclose. So it's just so interesting that in all of these industries, it really, it's so similar, and it's angering, but also really cool that there are so many more places like Dry Farm Wines and these other smaller companies that are doing it the right way and being transparent about the ingredients they're using and about the sourcing and all of that. So I just want to throw that out there because it is,
It's about money.
So true.
It's about money. So in America, uniquely, this is happening all over the world.
Yeah.
But America likes to scale everything. We're good at scaling.
Yep.
It might be the most popular used business term in the United States is, how do we scale?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so why don't we work on scaling health instead of scaling toxins?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so, but in America, we like to scale everything, right? Which means making it faster and cheaper and more profitable.
Absolutely.
And that's what all of these problems are associated with, is money.
Yeah.
It's what we focus on is living a natural life, right? That slows things down, not speeds them up.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Which is, why at my company every morning we spend the first hour of every day. Now we're doing it via Zoom, but we have a meditation room in our office where, 40 of us meditate together every morning. Yeah. But now we're doing it via Zoom because we believe life should start off slow and peaceful in the morning.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Which we meet at 10 o'clock. From 10 to 11, we meditate and have gratitude practices every day from the very beginning of the company.
So important.
Because that's how we think you should live.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to do more, faster, bigger.
Sure.
It will come to you in time. If you live right, the right things will come to you.
Yeah.
So it's, but it's crazy. It's happening across. I don't use any kind of commercial beauty products. You can obviously see I'm not very beautiful. But the only skincare product that I use is coconut oil.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and that works for me. I don't even, and I use Dr. Bonner's soap, which is non-toxic and contains,
they're great.
Contains coconut oil as well.
A lot of uses.
But, so it's terrible. What's in your toothpaste? These foaming agents and craziness.
Yeah. I just did an interview with a company that creates a safer toothpaste. They have toothpaste, mouthwash, and floss. And I just interviewed the CEO of that company, actually. which
Yeah, I make my own toothpaste out of
oh wow, okay.
coconut oil, Himalayan sea salt, and baking soda.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
really all you need. It's you've got the antimicrobials and all of coconut oils. I mean, a solution for almost anything, really.
Yeah, I don't eat a lot of it, but I used to back in the day when I did bulletproof coffees.
Yeah.
I gave up. I gave those up when I started fasting because it kick you out of fast.
Yeah.
And then I gave up coffee about a year ago, surprisingly.
So
So
in terms of like, finding these natural, obviously like dry farm wines is you're going above and beyond. But from what I'm hearing you, are there like for people that want to, take that trip to Napa or Sonoma or whatever, are there any places in the US that we can enjoy these natural wines, or is that pretty much non-existent?
no,
Wow.
no, there's just no. I think there's one natural grower in Napa.
Yep.
Doesn't make wine that fits our criteria,
Yeah.
but I'm only aware of one in Napa.
Yeah.
Most of the natural wine growers in the United States are Napa's too expensive to make natural wine,
Mm.
right? So, see, natural wines are quite affordable.
Yeah.
So all of our wines sell for $22 a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of a single Napa Valley wine that sells for $22,
Yeah.
no matter how it's made.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, the reason for that is because the cost of land. Because most people in the wine business, not all, but most of the people in the wine business in Napa don't really make any money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the cost of land is too high. So when I first moved here 20 years ago, Francis Ford Coppola, who has a winery here,
Very familiar. Yep. Seen
bought, this is 21 years ago, bought some land adjacent to his property. He owns about, I don't know, maybe 1,200 acres.
Sure.
He's like one of the largest landowners in Napa. And this is 20 years ago, he paid $300,000 an acre, which at that time was thought to be an outlandish amount of money for Napa Valley Vineyard. Today, prices can reach up to $1 million an acre. And at those prices, you just can't make wine make money.
Yeah.
Right. So what you have largely now, are Silicon Valley billionaires and people who've made money doing which, what, or the ever, come out here and buy a winery or create a winery. And, they don't really care if they make money doing it, and then bottle prices for the top wines are, start at $150 and go up to $1,500.
Right.
For a single bottle of wine. Right. So, and then the wine style that is made here is just very different. It's high alcohol. It's very fruity, balmy. It's just a big style of wine.
Yeah.
Which now a lot of people just don't enjoy.
Yeah.
So and millennials don't drink it. It just doesn't suit their flavor profile, and they don't want to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but anyway, but Napa's a beautiful place to live.
I'm sure.
And world-class restaurants, an amazing lifestyle, beautiful people. The people who live here are amazing. And if you like the wine style, which I don't, but if you like the wine style, then it's as good as any in the world if you drink that kind of wine. Sure. Like big Bordeaux's or Napa, that's just a style of wine.
Sure.
So it's not only the style of Napa, it's made in other places in the world, Argentina,
right,
parts of South Africa, that make these style wines. But so anyway, that's you might guess I'm probably not too popular in Napa. Right? So I rail on the wine industry.
I do. So I have another question because I did a post about you guys on my Instagram, and I got somewhat attacked by someone who owns a vineyard. I don't know where he's located. I think in California. But he did have a question that I want to just see if I can find it and get it answered so I know what I'm talking about.
Surprisingly, I'll tell you, we are very active on social.
Yeah.
50 million views last year or something. I mean, you're super active on social. And we get surprisingly less negative comments than I would have expected,
Yeah.
given our size and presence.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not like unheard of, but they're not, like a lot of people in the nutritional and fitness space and performance get attacked quite brutally.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen to us. And, I think we just put a lot of love out in the energy. So did you find the comment?
Yeah. So he was saying, because I talked about the gut bacteria, the gut, which I think is so cool because I mean, I've struggled with gut issues a lot. I know a lot of my audience is, struggles with that. And so that was really cool. I didn't even realize that. And so he said that he doubts the bacteria can live or thrive in our gut or could be alive in the wine with such high alcohols, very low pH, and SO2 present. Plus most probiotic strains that I'm aware of, but I'm no expert in this by any means. So he was saying that they can't survive the process. I'm assuming it's...
Well, I'm not an expert in the gut microbiome either, but Dr. David Perlmutter is.
Yes.
And has written at least 3 times about our wines and the living bacteria that is in wine.
Yeah.
There's no question that there are living bacteria in wine unless it's been sterilized. Okay. Meaning it's gotten a sterilizing dose of sulfur dioxide.
Sure.
It's going to have living bacteria, and that's the reason they sterilize it.
Yeah.
They don't want bottle-to-bottle variation. They don't want, I'm talking about commercial winemakers.
Yeah.
Who, when I say sterilize, we call it mummify the wine. They want to kill it, right? To McDonaldize it. So that makes every bottle taste the same. There's no bottle-to-bottle variation. You get rid of all of the risk of future bacterial fault, and it also preserves the wine. So natural wines are not meant to be laid down for 10 years, right? I mean, they're fresh, they're alive, and you need to drink them in the first 5 to 10 years, right? Most of our wines drank within 5 to 10 days, right? But and 90% of wine purchases in the United States are drank within 24 hours of purchase. But because you have to get our wine from us, it obviously doesn't get drank in the first 24 hours.
Yeah.
But certainly in the first 24 days in most cases, or in the first 5 days in most cases.
Well,
so
yeah.
So I'm not an expert on the gut microbiome, nor do I intend to become one. Yeah. But the leading expert in the United States has written several times, specifically lab tested, and talked about our wines and specific bacteria that is in our wine.
Cool. I love that. So cool. And that's, so that leads me into my next question is part of what I love wine. I've always loved wine. I'm also a huge wine snob. I'm very picky when it comes to wine, which same, I tried some natural wines prior to trying yours that some of them just tasted watery or like didn't have a lot of flavor. And, again, I think it's what you were talking about previously. But another thing I started encountering was, after the age of like 30, the headaches and the hangovers, it's like all of a sudden you have one glass and you don't sleep and you wake up with a pounding headache, which doesn't happen as much when you're younger. So that was another reason that I started looking into like, well, this is terrible. I don't want to have to deal with this. And I love wine. And that's another reason that, I ended up kind of stumbling upon you guys.
Look, there's no question about it. We can talk about it, but the fact of the matter is, to experience natural wine is to have a more elevated experience with wine. Yeah. It tastes better. You feel better. Yeah. It's very difficult to get a hangover, possible, but difficult.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're drinking lower alcohol wines.
Sure.
And so I normally drink at least a bottle a night. So it's, I don't wake up in the middle of the night dehydrated. I don't wake up with a hangover, brain fog, any of the things. I drink a bottle of commercial wine. I feel terrible while doing it, and even worse tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Right. And so, people know indisputably when we hear it all the time. I can't go back to drinking regular wines. You've ruined me. What I do when I go to restaurants is like, well, you take wine with you. Yeah. If you live in a state where you can't take it with you, then you have a bigger problem. Yeah. Most states allow for corkage. Yeah. Varies from state to state. In California, it's super common. Okay. Where do you live?
I'm in Denver.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think you have corkage in Denver.
Okay, so you can bring it to the restaurant.
Yes, you can bring about they may charge you a fee.
Sure.
It's normally $5 to $25, depending
Okay.
upon, that's the normal range.
Yeah.
$15 is kind of the midpoint.
Yeah.
Most places are like $15. Most people don't know. If you live in California, you know because everybody does it because it's a big
Yeah.
wine state,
Yeah.
right? Most people don't know that you can carry a bottle of wine in and pay a corkage fee.
Yeah.
But you can just call the restaurant. Sometimes even when you call the restaurant, because I travel, all over the United States, and I travel with my own wine, right? I fly it around with me. And so if if you just call, you just say, and they answer the phone, you just say, "Hey, I was calling to inquire what your corkage fee is," and they'll be like, "What? Can I bring wine in, and do you charge me for it?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I mean, sometimes they don't even know what the term means.
Okay.
Particularly if you're talking to some kid, some young host or hostess, right? They don't even know
Right.
what corkage means. You
Right.
have to say, sometimes they even have to ask. They don't even know. Like, oh yeah, sure, we charge $10.
Right. Right. That's
So which is fair enough. At the price of our wines, even if you pay a $10 or $15 corkage fee, it's going to be cheaper than any of the wines on their list,
yeah. Yeah.
right? In most cases,
Yeah.
and then of course what you're drinking.
Right. So I'd love to educate the viewers a little bit about what it looks like to get your wines, because it is a membership generally that people do. So, and I know you can do like red or white or mixed. Now, do people get to choose their varietals? Are those varietals always just changing based on the people you're working with? So I'd love to learn a little bit more about where you're
All of
from and
all
how
of the above.
they're changing.
So we are a wine club, which means that you sign up for a membership,
Yeah.
and you get frequency of deliveries at your choice. Could be monthly, could be weekly, could be quarterly, could be semi-annually, could be every other month.
Sure.
And you choose the quantity, 6 or 12 bottles. I mean, we have people that get 12 bottles a week, right? So, I mean, you choose any frequency that you want.
Yeah.
Then you choose the amount that you want and the color or colors that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you have all red. You could have mixed red and white. You could have rosé, sparkling, red, any combination you want.
Yeah.
Now, here's the fun part about what we do as a club. We curate wines for you, so you don't choose them.
Mm-hmm.
We curate them for you, and we send you sort of a surprise box.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Now, the reason that's fun is because you're going to get to try wines and varietals that you would never have heard of before.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Americans know the top 8: Cabernet, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. Well, there are thousands of grape varietals around the world.
Yeah.
So if you're just ordering what you know, you're not going to get to experience these extraordinary wines of grapes you don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the fun part about it. Now, I drink a particular type of wine, not a particular grape. I have grapes that I prefer. Mm-hmm. But I'd like drinking a lighter, lower alcohol, fresh style wine. Yeah. Right? It's just what I like to drink. It's friendlier with food for me. It's lower in alcohol. I can drink a lot more of it. And so I tend to drink Pinot Donis or Schiava, which is an Italian grape, or Pinot Noir, mm-hmm. which is a commonly known grape. So I drink lighter style wines. That's just what I prefer. If you are like me, we will curate a subscription for you. If all you want is Pinot Noirs, that's all we'll send you, right? So you can have anything you want. Okay. 97 or 8% of our members prefer to get the curated experience. Yeah. But then there's some people like me. I would be one of those people. I'm just not interested in this other style of wine. Yeah. Right. And so we have custom subscriptions. And then you can buy our wines in one-time orders. But the only way you can do that is if you're on our email list.
Got it.
So if you sign up for our email list, and we normally do twice a month, one box subscription, one box offers. Mm-hmm. And those could be from 3 to 6 bottles, okay. Right? We normally do those twice a month. And the only people who see those are the people on our email list. I say we normally do them. We're not doing them right now because we can't get wine fast enough. Mm. We don't have any extra wine to do promos with. Yeah. We need all the wine we can get right now just to satisfy our membership.
Got it.
Right? Because our business has grown so fast and people are drinking a lot more during COVID. And so it's just, we and shipping, since we're right in the middle of the pandemic at the time of recording, shipping, the shipping capacity coming out of Europe has been, in the beginning of the virus, was down 90% from capacity. Now it's at about 50% capacity. So we've had, and then people are drinking more, and they're drinking earlier and drinking later, right?
Yeah.
While they're sheltered in home.
Sure.
So our members have needed a lot of wine, right? And so we've had to suspend our normal twice a month promos temporarily while we get more wine over from Europe.
Okay.
So, but normally if you're on our email list, you would get twice a month promotions. And but normally we're a wine club because we're really situated. The goal was, I wanted to help regular wine drinkers, right? Because I'm a regular wine drinker.
Yeah.
I drink every day. Unless I'm doing an extended water fast, I drink wine every single day. And so, and the people who need the most help with drinking and their health is the people who drink the most, right? And so my customers and members don't want to have to order wine. They just want it to show up.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're going to drink it.
Sure.
Right. And then like lots of enthusiasts, particularly health and performance enthusiasts and people who love wine, they hang out with other wine drinkers. Yeah. They tend, if you're health and performance oriented, you more likely to hang out with other people who are interested in their health, because it's kind of your lifestyle. Yeah. Right. It's not something you do, it's a way you live. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. And so then we have a lot of organic growth as well, because then people tell their friends. Yeah. They're like, oh, wow, you can drink this. Let me introduce, they take it to dinner. It's like, you got to taste this wine. Yeah. It tastes much better and you feel so much better. Yeah. Right. So people are constantly introducing their friends to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you go into a wine store, because we've already established that US wines are pretty much, don't drink them. But in a wine store, when you have these wines from other places, France, Italy, etc., is it possible to find wines that are higher quality, or like anything you can look for, or how would someone navigate?
Well, no, not really. Not really. Here's what I do in the rare, almost never instance where this happens, but has happened before. I end up somewhere and I don't have any wine. Yeah. I've run out of wine. Yeah. Winophobia, vinophobia, the fear of running out of wine.
It's a real thing.
Vinophobia. So I will go typically to France and central France, where it's likely to be cooler, because the other thing I'm looking for is lower alcohol. Yeah. So I'm going to start with, like, if there's no natural wine there and I'm in the grocery store, I'm going to start looking at alcohol levels. Sure. I'm going to try to find something around 12%. Yeah. Anything with a 12 in it or lower. Yeah. Right. Normally you might find something in central France where it's cooler at 12 or 12.5%, maybe. But you have to look a lot, right? And then that's sort of where I start. So if it's lower alcohol, I'm just going to presume it's a little healthier. Okay. Right. And it's a winemaking style that low intervention winemakers tend to gravitate to. That doesn't mean all lower alcohol wines are healthier. Right. It's just like, it's more likely. And I just don't like alcohol. Yeah. Right. And I don't like the style of high alcohol wines. Yeah. Right. So a high alcohol wine has a style to it. It's juicy, it's bigger, it's denser. It has these long finishes, which are from glycerol, which is a high sugar byproduct. It has, it's just heavier. Yeah. Alcohol adds density to wine. And not only do I not like alcohol, but I don't like the taste of the density. It's not friendly to my diet. Yeah. So my members, not all, but many, are interested in a healthier way of drinking, and they live healthy lifestyles, which means they eat fresher food, right? They don't eat processed food. They don't tend to eat a lot of sugar either. That does not say that I don't have some members who do, but we're known as the keto wine, right? We're known as the paleo wine. We're known as the healthy wine. That's just who we are and how we live.
So does that mean that that these like wine practices, they're going on in other countries as well? It's not just here, which is
you're talking about the style of wine that I don't like.
Just like the practices of
it's all over the globe. But again, nobody scales like America scales. Right. It's everywhere here. it's and and one of the reasons is because of irrigation, right? I mean, so you're picking, other countries typically pick fruit at lower sugar, right? And so that produces a different style of wine. And people say to me all the time, I go to Italy for a summer vacation, I drink wine at lunch, I feel great. I mean, so people say, oh, I feel great drinking wine in Europe. Well, that's true, but that's in part because of the winemaking style. It doesn't mean it's natural wine. It's just oftentimes lower in alcohol, and it's less extracted. It's a winemaking style. It also has less oak.
Okay.
I mean, we believe that there are compounds in new oak that are making people feel bad as well.
Right.
Which natural winemakers don't use any new oak.
Got it. Okay.
And new oak is not commonly used except in higher priced wines across Europe, because oak barrels are very expensive, new ones.
Okay.
And so and small family farms simply couldn't afford them even if they wanted them.
Yeah.
It's like $800, between 800 and 1,000 euros per barrel.
Okay.
Right.
And then oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, do you list anywhere the farms that you work with if someone were to be traveling and wanted to potentially visit them?
We don't, but that's a good question. No, we don't.
I'm just thinking, like, as someone who loves wine, if I was traveling and going to be near.
Well, if you're a member and you contacted us, I mean, we have a sort of a concierge service. We help you out.
Cool.
One of the reasons we don't publish that information aggregated in that way is because it's a bit of a trade secret, if you will, because we had certified these wines. So then people go out and say, oh, I sell the same wines that Dry Farm Wine sells, right?
Yeah.
So to some degree it's proprietary, but if you're a member and you need some help, and people contact us all the time, I'm going to Italy, I'm going to be in, Piedmont. Is there, do you have any growers there I should go visit? And we'll help line them up. We'll get appointments for them or help them.
That's
awesome. So
what about your company? Do you have a tasting room or anything like that? Or
we do not.
Okay.
We do not. But we also do tastings for members who travel here. So if a member, contacts us and like, hey, I'm coming to Napa Valley. Do you have any recommendations? Like, well, we'd be happy to host a tasting for you if you'd like. Here's recommendations for restaurants or hotels or, whatever you need help with. If you want to do a tasting with us, we're happy to host that.
Cool.
Right. And we get contacted, weekly by people who are coming here and want to, usually they just want recommendations, but we commonly do tastings for people who visit Napa. We don't have a tasting room, and, we're an online business, and we do like to party.
I actually got to experience. I met you guys at Paleo FX.
Okay.
Ago,
nice.
And Anthony, he doesn't work for you anymore, but him and I hit it off, and he invited me to it was some party with like steak and wine and just so much food and wine. It was amazing.
Yeah, so we host house parties at these events where we invite our friends over, and maybe 60, 80, 100 people will come over, and we cook and all keto and drink lots of wine and stay up late, be crazy. Yeah, we love to party.
I'm excited because I'm working with a functional doctor who has just had me turn me into. I've done keto before, but she wants me to go back to a more keto style to help with some hormone balancing. And so I was like, I'll do it as long as I can still drink Dry Farm wines. Absolutely.
Did she know what Dry Farm Wines was?
Yes, she actually is an affiliate with you guys. Yeah. So
nice. Perfect.
She's
Perfect.
great. So I was like, that's my deal. I'll do it on this one, but this is my one thing.
Awesome.
So
we're wrapping up. Is there anything else?
No, I think that's all. I really appreciate your time. It's so cool that you're doing what you're doing. Keep it up. I'm so excited to be able to support you guys. And I'm heading in a couple hours with a bottle of your wine to a friend's to barbecue and hang out. So
nice. We'll have fun. Take 2 bottles with you.
You're right. I should.
Yeah. You don't want to get over there and run out of wine.
Yeah. I have to put another order in really soon.
Nice. Well, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah.
And I look forward to us meeting up again somewhere, maybe at Paleo FX next year.
I know. Well, if I'm ever in your area, I will definitely let you know.
Please come. We will feed you and
have to ask me
pour lots of wine in your throat. Yes, it would be amazing.
Awesome. And then just so for everyone watching, I'll put my link in here when I upload the video for anyone that wants to join and try out the wine. They can use my link and you can get an extra bottle for a penny.
Yes, a penny bottle.
Yeah.
All
Awesome.
right. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks
Have a
so
great
much.
day.
All
See
right.
ya.
Bye.